I know that the case for medieval wisdom may be a hard one to make with many modern Christians. Evangelicals in particular have what might be called a virulent case of anti-medievalism. And it has some roots and some truth in those roots in the Reformation period. Martin Luther observed a kind of opulence and distraction in late medieval worship and arts that he was worried was going to compromise and paint over the very simple and basic and counterintuitive gospel of a God who comes to earth in a dirty stable, who dies on a cross, all of this that's not anything that human reason would have figured out or human art would have made up. And he was afraid that all of the lavishness of the gilding, the arts, the worship music even, might lead people astray into a purely human mode of religion, a theology of glory rather than a theology of the cross. And while Luther himself remained fairly moderate on this, he still used church music, he still used liturgical and even sacramental styles of worship. Those who followed after sometimes were much more radical in their approach and their desire to strip Christianity of all of these accoutrements and to focus only on the spiritual center. Ulrich Zwingli was one of these, the Swiss reformer, who really distrusted everything external and everything material. Only the kernel, the spiritual truth was important. And so he nailed shut the organ in his Grossmünster church. On top of the Reformation era's distrust of human tradition, there's an evangelical intensification of this same thing that goes on. It really starts in the 1800s in frontier American revivalism. And there you have a desire to go directly to the throne room of God and a distrust of those perhaps elite educated ministers who might tell you that you need their leadership and their 4-year degrees and their sophisticated theological understandings. Increasingly, American evangelicalism after the 1800s believed that it could go directly in its experience and its revivalistic fervor directly to God, and also directly to God through reading Scripture, believing that Scripture was inherently clear and perspicuous. You could just look straight into it. Anybody with an ordinary kind of intelligence could know what it said and could translate its truths well for their own life without the helps of traditional perspectives. If you believe, as many evangelicals do, that no human mediation or tradition is necessary to live a full and faithful life here in the present as Christians, then you have no reason to go looking in history for wisdom, as I try to do in this book. So even though I do believe in and value that value of personal connection and personal encounter with God, both in a kind of mystical way and also through the reading of Scripture, and in fact, I show that medievals shared that commitment, and I spend a chapter on that later in the book. I also have to spend an entire chapter earlier in the book making the case for tradition, why it's valuable, why we need it, why it's helpful to us. Lewis certainly knew that case and brought it forward, and we need to hear it again too, I think.